Greetings, YouTube! Well, once again, a summer has passed us by. It is now the beginning of September. Kids are going back to school. College students are going off to start drinking heavily for the first 2 weeks before it settles in and they're back to college. And the movie season has thus ended, which is the subject of this week's podcast. Yes, once again, the big hit summer movies have passed us by, and it's time to reflect. Now we'll have a little bit of another pre-season when it comes time for that, holiday, Thanksgiving to Christmas rush. But until then, there's really not going to be much out. So it's time to reflect on what Hollywood produced this year. And I think the theme of it is just disappointment. Yes, there was some great movies came out. They were not all universally bad, but I felt that going into this movie season, I felt there was a lot of potential, especially a lot of potential for a lot of original stuff, but a lot of that didn't pan out. Or if it did pan out, it didn't get the box office it deserved. Now, before I get any further into this, I should point out I'm only going to be commenting on films and from stuff that I saw. Now, every time I went to go see a movie this summer, I did a review. So if you don't see a review of it, before this video came out at least, that means I didn't see it. And so if there's a movie out there that was great, and maybe I, in the future too, will agree, but I don't mention it, well, it's because I didn't see it, and I can't comment on that. Now, what I meant by why there was a lot of potential, it seemed at first that there was going to be a lot of original, non-sequel movies coming out. I mean, you had Priest, some could argue Battle Los Angeles is in the summer, although I wouldn't put it there. You had, well, actually now that you had Super 8, Cowboys and Aliens. You had some original films coming out that's weren't really based on any really big established franchises. I mean, yes, Thor and Captain America were technically new, but they were based on a media entity that is well known, big part of pop culture, and has its own fan base built in. Yes, Priest was based on a graphic novel, but it wasn't. It didn't have a massive fan base. Priest, they weren't like Priest dolls in Toys R Us when the graphic novel came out. Not on Captain America, Thor, they did. So there's a big difference between there. And, well, even when it comes to sequels and established franchises, there was a lot of disappointment there as well. So how should I start off here? Well, Battle Los Angeles, I guess I will talk to that real quick. It met my expectations. It was pretty much what I was hoping for. It was a Black Hawk Down style alien invasion film, which we haven't had a straight up, if you think about it, we haven't had a straight up Army versus aliens invasion. And that's why I kind of had some positive feelings. That movie met what I wanted to see. And I thought, okay, this is a good start because this is, minor stuff. This is like the preseason games. No one cares that much, but it was a good sign. And then we got hit with Thor. Thor, I think, was one of the better comic book hero movies. It certainly did well at the box office, and it deserved it. I laughed at it. A lot of people have complained about the one character, the assistant. I forget her name. But she could be annoying, but she wasn't in there enough, at least for me, to get really annoyed at. And then came Priest, which did poorly at the box office, and it had issues. I mean, it really did. There was some great stuff in the film. I'll admit that I probably gave it a... I won't back down completely on my review of it. Yeah, it had some flaws, but it didn't quite live up to what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot bigger, and it had some problems. That was due to editing. It was due to editing, and due to, well, 3D. This was one of those films that I couldn't, at least around here. I think there was 2D versions, but I mean, I'm here on the Jersey Shore. This is not a remote area. There's theaters all over the place. I couldn't find a 2D showing. And there are I have two theaters in Toms River here. There's theaters in Bricktown, the next town over. There's other theaters a little further out, but once you get past like a 15-20 minute drive to the theater, at least here in Jersey, I understand if you're, from Nebraska, that might seem like a quick trip. Uh, that's getting unreasonable for Jersey. But even then, I couldn't find a 2D showing of that. And I think that's what hurt a lot of films this year. I think 3D. This is kind of the summer. I think that 3D died. That the public has kind of just gotten tired of it. Realizes the gimmick, doesn't want to pay the extra money for these 3D films, and that's backed up by actual market research that is showing that 3D films are bringing in less and less money, especially compared to their 2D counterparts. Not just 2D movies, but 2D versions of the same film. So it's clear. And I think, in retrospect, this is when we're going to say this is when audiences turned against 3D. I mean, 3D is going to be around for probably another couple of years, but it's going to be a downward spiral, I think, from here. And I'll get into especially when we get into Fright Night and Conan, especially. Now, especially, Priest was essentially a failure. It worldwide combined gross, both international and U.S., was only $77 million. It had a $60 million budget, which I must say for a $60 million film, it looked pretty good. I'll give them credits on that. But you have to understand, for a film to actually turn a profit for the studio, it has to earn back twice, because that gross is split between the theaters and the studios, the distributors, basically. So basically the studio spent $60 million on this, got a little over like $36 million back. Clearly that's a bomb. And don't think DVD sales make up that much. I mean, thus far, according to the numbers.com, US DVD sales have only accounted for about $3.5 million. Yeah, so it's basically just gotten to 80. This was a film that had to get about 150 million in box office to return worldwide. And I think the 3D hurt this film, and I think it hurt several films, because this one was basically put out as a 3D only film, and a lot of people went, especially who were interested in seeing the film, because you can't say that this bad word of mouth. Bad word of mouth is hard to hurt a film nowadays because it's such short. And it didn't have that great of an opening box office. So, I mean, even if critics are saying a film is bad, most people don't listen to the traditional critics anymore. They're much more willing to try it out for themselves. And I think this is another one where a lot of people went, 3D, I don't feel like paying the extra money. It's a ripoff. And I think the same thing happened with Fright Night and Conan the Barbarian. Even though, I mean, yes, I've seen the comments on my Conan review, and I've seen the comments on other people's review, and I've seen other people's reviews. That's still not the reason. That might be the reason why I didn't do good the second week it was out. But the fact that I couldn't find a 3D showing of that, or 2D showing of Conan anywhere around, and the fact that, well, I'll get into this in a second. I might as well talk about Conan and Fright Night here. At least their 3D aspects. Conan had an extremely disappointing opening. The fact, even though it has a well-established fan base, fantasy stuff is still popular. Look at Harry Potter's success this year. But it was pretty much essentially only in 3D. Again, around here, we don't have small theaters. We have rather large theaters around here. Big multiplexes, multiple multiplexes. And yet I couldn't find a 2D showing of that film to go to. And I think a lot of people saw that one. I don't know if that $3, especially right now with today's economy, is really hurting. A lot of people would just rather not see it. They'd rather wait to go see it in the box on DVD or rent it on Netflix. And that's what happened. And especially, I know with Fright Night, I was going to go see Fright Night with a couple friends that were going to go, and we looked up on Fandango, and they couldn't find they were all hyped to go see Fright Night, but lo and behold, when they couldn't find a 2D showing. There was only 3Ds. They were like, I don't feel like going. I don't want to see it in 3D. That was a film where they literally had people that were wanting to go see it, were willing to pay the regular price, but because they couldn't find a 2D showing, chose not to see the film at all. And I guarantee you, considering how poor both of those movies did at the box office, that, well, that was a big reason why. Now, true, they were both kind of going after the same audience, so you could have argued if one of those films was out during the weekend, it would have got some crossover audience, yes, but really, I think a lot of people that would have normally seen it decided not to because they couldn't find 2D showings. Hopefully that'll mean that this next year coming out, studios will change it and make sure that there's more, or especially not necessarily studios, but the theaters themselves will try to push for there being more 2D showings of films. I think that'll help the actual industry if they do that. I think a lot of theater owners though will be hesitant. Hopefully there'll be a lot of chatter about that. 2D is priority. If you have an extra theater, then that's when you put the 3D in. Hopefully that'll be the case because I guarantee you more people start seeing them. But I digress. Getting back on track with about more films that were disappointments. We had Thor. Thor lived up to its expectations. It was an excellent new addition to the Marvel Universe. I think it was very well put together. Certainly one of the better films, and I'll get to what I think was the best film of the summer in a bit. But we had Thor. I think the next one I saw, Pirates of the Caribbean, which quite honestly is a rather forgettable film. We'll see if it launches. I don't know. Is it Pirates fatigue? It was a very weak script. I think that was the big problem. There was. I mean, when you're watching it, you're entertained, but there are some scripting issues. I think that after you get further away from the film, it becomes a little bit more forgettable. Maybe I hear they're gonna make another one. I would expect them to make another one at this point. So we'll see how that turns out. But I think there was a bit of franchise fatigue on Pirates, but it was okay. I didn't see the 3D. So, anyone complaining about it? I heard the 3D was horrible in it, but yeah, didn't see that. The Hangover Part 2 was mostly, this is another one, I coming in, I think, thinking back on this too, this is another one I was a little disappointed in now, really, in retrospect, I should say. It had the ability to have something bigger, or to throw new jokes in, but it was really a lot of repeat jokes from the first film. And I was expecting a lot of new stuff. I mean, I liked when they had all the fun with the monk. That was a little fun. That was funny, and there was new elements that made it funnier. But they hit way too many of the same notes from the first film. And I think that hurt it a bit. And so again, that's another one. In retrospect, it looked like it was really great. A big budget, hard R comedy series. It's gonna break out. It sounded great. I would not be surprised if they do a part 3 because it did make a lot of money. But the first one was still better. Again, I was disappointed in X-Men First Class. Great film. Really solid. Very arguably the best film in the entire X-Men movie collection. There was some issues, I think, with forcing the whole Magneto and Xavier breaking apart way too early. Should have been held off for another movie, but I don't think they were certain they were given another chance to do a second, or to do what are we on here? A fifth X-Men movie. Not including the Wolverines, which would then make it a 6th X-Men movie. So it's very confusing with the X-Men stuff. So I can kind of understand why they forced that whole Xavier Magneto split in this movie. But overall, it was really fun. But it didn't do that great at the box office. I mean, it was all right. believe it made, let's see here, according to, once again, thenumbers.com. Yeah, it was a $160 million film. Its total worldwide gross was 352, basically $353 million. It made its money back, and it made a little extra moolah on the side. And it'll probably sell a good number of DVDs, which will help the profit level, or will help profits. But it wasn't a phenomenal breakout. If it brought in another, I don't know, 100 million worldwide, i.e., another 50 million, made 200 million in the U.S., it would have been much better for it. I think I did see this one in 3D, but that's kind of what I'm saying. That's one of the themes of disappointment. Is like, here was a good movie, but it didn't do as it made a profit, so that's good for studios. Studios like that, but it wasn't a great profit. So once again, that's somewhat of a disappointment because you don't know if studios going to make more films like this now. You have Super 8, which was really fun, excellent, very much brought back the whole feel of a Spielberg film from about the period it's supposed to be taking place in. Probably certainly one of the better films of this summer, and at least really a bright shot. And it's a good film, and it's a good film that made a ton of money. I mean, I just said it that X-Men First Class cost $160 million. This film cost $50 million, and they're both special effects films. But man, this one did a much. The effects were much better in this film, I must say, compared to the two. They probably technically weren't as many as effects shots, but hey. But it brought in about $245 million. So that's multiple times what it cost to make. So it is the rare diamond that you discover. Let's see here. Green Lantern, universally panned. I agree somewhat. It was very to me, I think, especially in retrospect. It's very forgettable. Now, I saw it a couple months ago, like 2 months ago, and now there's not a whole lot that stuck with me from that film. I guess that's a big disappointment. Priest stuck with me more. At least Priest had some really cool, interesting visuals. And the Green Lantern, probably maybe to a degree that Hal Jordan shouldn't have been played by Ryan Reynolds. Maybe not that Ryan Reynolds didn't do a bad job, is a bad actor or anything. It's just that, I don't know, maybe he doesn't fit that particular superhero. Yeah. So once again, disappointment. A lot of expectations. Didn't deliver either in the box office really or an actual quality. And then you had Dark of the Moon, which, as I said before, I haven't been the most vicious of people attacking Transformers, but man, that ending battle dragged on so long, and in a way that even Battle Los Angeles which is essentially one long battle scene throughout the entire movie. I didn't feel the same way when I left that when you finish up this hour-long battle at the end of that. But it's Transformers. Everything I could say has been said about Transformers. See my review. Do my follow-up. It's got a lot of homophobic vibe to it, which actually Michael Bay does a lot. I was watching Bad Boys, the first Bad Boys the other day, and I started picking up on that there. Michael Bay really does the gay jokes a lot in his films. He needs some control, because it gets old. Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 2. It was good. Like I said this in that review, I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. This is like the third Harry Potter film I've seen, so really not the authority to judge on if this was good. It seemed like it was. It seemed like there was a lot of people that you could kind of tell were camera's like, hey, it's this guy from that previous movie, which I haven't seen. So for me, it didn't hold the impact, but it was somewhat exciting. And I don't know how accurate it is to the book, so I'm gonna leave it at that just because I don't have as much background on it. We had Captain America, which was fucking awesome. Uh, More on that. Well, I guess I could talk. This another good one of the few really good ones that also made money. Although I believe Thor made more money than Captain America, uh, which is kind of interesting that Thor made more money. Uh, I think Thor was a little bit more humorous than Captain America, which might have helped it. And I think it was also new and fresh. I think it was much more fresh. But so were these. Actually, both of these particular Marvel movies, leading into, of course, the Avengers, were a little bit more fresh. You had this one taking place in World War II, and that alone brought in a lot of much more interesting. You haven't seen a whole lot of, really, if I can think of actual big budget movies, other than a few flashback scenes that take place in World War II, you don't see that. And again, another thing we saw in X-Men First Class was, let's look at superheroes in previous time periods. And then the Thor had, of course, the magic and science being mixed originally, and it was different than you've seen in most films, especially in the way they presented it. And I think that helped both films. They were very refreshing. They were also both very funny, and hit some good strides. We also had Cowboys and Aliens, which another one is. This was a great film. But box office was disappointing. I mean, this was a great. It had practical effects. It had really great cast. I mean, I still stand by that. It's probably the best cast film of the year. But production budget on this film was $163 million. Its worldwide gross, unfortunately, was $135 million. So, I mean, even its regular gross did not bring in the money to cover the budget. And it's a shame because this is a damn good movie. And I hate it when people go, well, it didn't, when people try to justify when a movie's good or not, whether it did good in the box office. Because box office is a horrible way to tell if a movie did good. And here's a perfect example. This film is good. I guarantee this film is going to be around a while. Its legacy of this film is going to be much more positive. It's going to be much more influential throughout the years. You'll see a lot of people come back to this film and cite this film, I think. But unlike a lot of these other films which did do good this year and will be forgotten, like Twilight's a perfect example. I guarantee you 10 years from now, no one's going to remember Twilight. But people will remember this film. Hopefully it does really good on DVD so that they know that the people that did see it liked it. I don't know why people didn't go shied away from it. I was able to see it in 2D. There was plenty of 2D showings of this film. I'm not even sure if there was a 3D version. I hope it doesn't ruin Jon Favreau's career because this film was good. The Iron Man films have been good. Yeah, the guy's a good director. And I think he's had enough hits, and I think this was critically well enough received that other than the pompous critics, that it shouldn't stop or put a roadblock in his career. But I do recommend, if you haven't seen this, check this movie out. Moving on. We also had, really after that, I didn't see anything else until I saw Conan, which I said outright in that review that I was probably going to be biased, and I think unlike a lot of people that were fans of the Conan the Barbarian and therefore were more negative, I had the opposite bias, where because I liked Conan the Barbarian so much, I gave this film a lot of passes. And I should have been a lot more harsh on it. I do acknowledge that. Though I'm still not going to go as far as everyone else has said. It's still a okay film. It's a fine action if you want to watch somebody cut people's heads off. It has a ton of gore, and it does have a lot more, I would say, some to a degree, violence and sex than a lot of modern movies have, especially if you compare it to like movies of the 80s and the 90s, really. Those really hard R 80s and 90s movies. So I am not afraid to say that it's not as bad as people are saying. I will stand by that. I will acknowledge that I probably gave it a lot more pass. It has a horrible scripting, and I did acknowledge most of that stuff in my review. It's an okay. You know, films are not binary, positive or negative reaction. This one is probably about a 4, 5, or 6. A genuine 4, 5, or 6, as in it's a at least for me, because it meets. You know, Conan, you're supposed to just get a guy cutting people's heads off and this brutal and all that stuff, and this film does have it. It could have been so much better. It could have cut out a lot of its action scenes, which would have saved on the budget too, and put a lot more character development scenes. And I think if they did that, it would have been awesome. It would have been fine. It would have been a great film, but way too many action scenes, which hurt it overall. And the fact that it was in 3D. Really only 3D. At least around here, I could only find it in 3D. And that scared away a lot of people, because even though it got a lot of bad reviews from people, that doesn't really explain why it didn't do as good the first week. Because, as I said, not a lot of people listen to professional reviews nowadays, especially for movies like this. And everyone else has to wait for people like me on YouTube, or people on That Guy with Glasses, or somewhere else on the internet to see the movie and then post a review, and maybe that'll affect, aggregated up, it'll affect the second or third week showing, which, let's face it, most theaters, a movie's in there for 3, maybe 4 weeks, and then it's out. So, I guarantee you, I think it was a combination. I don't think the advertisement campaign for this was that great. There's another thing for this summer. It's the summer of the really bad advertisement campaigns between X-Men, First Class, and Conan. But I will acknowledge that this film was probably a little bit worse than I made it seem in my review. I mean, that's the downside of a lot of times doing a review right after you see a film, is you still haven't had a whole lot of time to digest a film. But it's not as. I still stand by it's not as horrible as everyone else is out there saying it is. But again, this is all my opinion. Disagree with me if you will, but we at least have things to look forward for 2012, which maybe genuinely will be a better year. Perhaps the economy will recover and we'll have an awesome movie season with movies like World War Z, Battleship, The Dark Knight Rises, The Avengers, and who knows what else that's going to be a genuinely original film come out. So here's looking to 2012. Here's also looking to holiday season 2011, which is still to come. And who knows, maybe there'll be a couple of great action, horror films, action and horror films actually, coming out for the fall season. I'll probably see Apollo 18 sometime this week, so you might want to stand by for a review on that, but I wouldn't hold my breath, I've got stuff to do during the week too. Signing off.